After 76 years of royal secrets, Prince Charles finally broke his silence about that night. When Diana died, he wasn't just sad, he was devastated. But that's not all. He confessed feeling blood on his hands for her death. What really happened in those final hours? Why did he fight the Queen to bring Diana's body home? And the shocking words he whispered when he saw her lifeless body. Brace yourself for the royal confession that changes everything. On July the 29th, 1981, the world turned its eyes to London. Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer were about to marry in what was called the wedding of the century. Over 750 million people watched on television, while more than 1 million lined the streets. The ceremony took place at St. Paul's Cathedral instead of Westminster Abbey, breaking royal tradition. The reason was simple. St. Paul's offered more space, making it possible for an even grander spectacle. Diana arrived in a glass carriage with her father, Earl Spencer. She wore a gown designed by David and Elizabeth Emanuel, covered in 10,000 pearls, with a record-breaking 25-foot train trailing behind her. Every detail was picture-perfect, yet beneath the surface, trouble had already begun. The night before the wedding, Charles was in tears. He still had feelings for Camilla Parker Bowles and felt torn about what he was about to do. Diana had her own moment of doubt. During the vows, she accidentally mixed up his name, calling him Philip Charles Arthur George, instead of Charles Philip Arthur George. It was a small mistake, but hinted at the nerves and unease that surrounded their union. The wedding cost an estimated $48 million, which would be around $70 to $110 million today. Security alone accounted for $600,000 due to heightened threats from groups like the Irish Republican Army. Despite these tensions, the day symbolized hope for the monarchy. The public believed they were witnessing the start of a perfect royal love story. The reality was far from it. In the early years, Charles and Diana seemed happy. Public appearances painted them as the ideal couple. Their 1983 tour of Australia was a huge success, with Diana charming crowds wherever they went. But behind the scenes, cracks had already begun to show. Diana, just 19 when she moved into Buckingham Palace, found herself isolated. Her friends and family were kept at a distance, and the pressures of royal life overwhelmed her. The media followed her every move, and the constant scrutiny took a toll. She developed bulimia, a condition that started before the wedding and worsened as the marriage continued. Depression set in, and the emotional distance between her and Charles grew wider. Charles had his own struggles. He had spent his entire life preparing to be king, but now he found himself overshadowed. Diana's charm and beauty made her the center of attention. Crowds adored her. The press couldn't get enough of her. Charles felt sidelined, and it frustrated him. Their arguments became more frequent. Diana was jealous of the time he spent away, whether on royal duties or with friends. Charles, on the other hand, didn't understand her emotional needs. After their second son, Prince Harry, was born in 1984, Diana told close friends she felt their marriage was already over. By 1986, Charles had rekindled his relationship with Camilla. Mutual friends encouraged her to reach out to him during a difficult time, and their affair began again. Rumors spread, but proof came in 1992, when a private phone call between them was leaked. The Tampon Gate scandal, as it was called, shocked the public. In the call, Charles joked about wanting to live inside Camilla's trousers as a tampon. It was a humiliating moment for the royal family, but it was far from the only scandal. Diana also found comfort outside the marriage. Her first known affair was with her bodyguard, Barry Manicky. Later, she became involved with James Hewitt, a cavalry officer she later admitted to loving. The tension between her and Charles grew unbearable. At a party in the late 1980s, Diana confronted Camilla directly. She told her, "I want my husband." Camilla responded coldly, "You've got everything you ever wanted." By this point, the world could see what was happening. The fairy tale was falling apart. On December 9, 1992, after years of speculation, Charles and Diana announced their separation. A few months earlier, Diana, her true story had been published, revealing her struggles with bulimia, depression, and thoughts of suicide. But the final blow came in 1995. During a BBC Panorama interview, Diana addressed Charles and Camilla's affair directly. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she said, "so it was a bit crowded." Her words sent shockwaves through the royal family and raised doubts about Charles's future as king. Shortly after the interview, the Queen stepped in. She sent letters to both Charles and Diana, urging them to divorce. By July 1996, the process was finalized. Diana received a £17 million settlement, about £40 million today, along with a yearly allowance of £400,000. She lost the title Her Royal Highness, but kept Princess of Wales. The couple shared custody of William and Harry, ensuring that both parents remained involved in their lives. Their divorce ended a turbulent chapter in royal history, but for Diana, life was just beginning. She dedicated herself to humanitarian work, earning admiration for her efforts to help those in need. For Charles, winning back public approval was far more difficult. He eventually married Camilla in 2005, but for years, the shadow of his first marriage followed him. After divorcing Prince Charles in 1996, Princess Diana stepped away from royal life and focused on something far more important: helping people. She had always been involved in charity work, but now she dedicated herself to causes that truly mattered to her. One of the most powerful moments of her humanitarian work came in 1987, when she visited an AIDS clinic. At the time, people still feared that HIV could be spread through casual contact. Diana changed that with a single gesture. She shook hands with an AIDS patient without gloves. That moment shattered a huge misconception. It showed the world that these patients deserved compassion, not fear. Over the next 10 years, Diana traveled the world to bring attention to AIDS awareness. She visited hospitals in South Africa, Brazil, and Canada, meeting patients and comforting those affected. By 1997, she was recognized as one of the most influential voices in the fight against the disease. That same year, she met Nelson Mandela in South Africa to discuss ways they could work together. She was no longer just a royal figure, she was a global activist. But her efforts didn't stop there. In January 1997, she traveled to Angola to take on another crisis: landmines. The world had seen wars end, but landmines remained buried in the ground, killing and injuring innocent people, especially children. Diana walked through a minefield that had been cleared by the Halo Trust, an organization working to remove landmines. The images of her carefully stepping through the dangerous terrain made headlines worldwide. She spoke in Washington, D.C. and London, urging world leaders to take action. Later that year, the Ottawa Treaty was signed, banning anti-personnel mines. Diana's voice had made a real difference. She also worked to support causes closer to home. In 1992, she became a patron of Centrepoint, a charity that helped homeless youth in the UK. Even after her death, her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, continued her work with the organization. She also worked with the Leprosy Mission, visiting hospitals in India and Zimbabwe. Just like she had done with AIDS patients, she made a simple but powerful statement: by touching people affected by leprosy, proving that there was nothing to fear. While she was making an impact on the world, she was also trying to find happiness in her personal life. That summer, she began a relationship with Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al-Fayed. They had met in the late 1980s, but after her divorce, things changed. The two spent the summer of 1997 on Mohammed's yacht, traveling through Saint-Tropez and Italy. The media followed them everywhere. In August, a British newspaper published a photo of them kissing on the yacht, a picture that reportedly sold for £500,000. The tabloids couldn't get enough of Diana and Dodi, and the paparazzi followed them constantly. Diana had spent years trying to escape the press. In her famous Panorama interview in 1995, she had spoken openly about how the constant media attention affected her. She described it as intolerable and said she often felt like she was being stalked. Paparazzi camped outside her home, followed her everywhere, and even harassed her at the gym. She had once confiscated a photographer's film because they refused to leave her alone. The obsession with her life never stopped. On August 30th, 1997, Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed arrived in Paris after a vacation in the Mediterranean. Their private jet landed at Le Bourget Airport at 3:30 p.m. The moment they stepped off the plane, paparazzi were already waiting. Photographers followed them as they left the airport and headed to Villa Windsor, a historic estate owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed. After a brief stop, they checked into the Ritz Paris at 4:30 p.m., booking the lavish Imperial Suite. They had planned to have dinner at Chez Benoit, a well-known Parisian restaurant, but changed their minds when they saw how many photographers were waiting outside. Instead, they stayed at the Ritz and had dinner in their suite. By 10:30 p.m., they sat down for what would be one of their final meals. Diana ordered mushrooms and asparagus as an appetizer and sole for her main course. Dodi chose turbot. The night should have been peaceful, but tension was everywhere. Diana had already been photographed looking anxious earlier that day. The paparazzi had been following them since they arrived. Some reports claimed that Dodi had bought a diamond ring worth $205,000. People speculated that he might have planned to propose that night. At midnight, Diana and Dodi decided to leave the Ritz. They planned to go to Dodi's apartment on Rue Arsène Housset. To avoid photographers, they used a black Mercedes S280 and left through the hotel's back entrance at 12:20 a.m. The plan didn't work. Paparazzi spotted them almost immediately and started chasing them on motorcycles. Henri Paul, the Ritz's deputy head of security, was driving. Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard, sat in the front seat. Diana and Dodi were in the back. Minutes later, tragedy struck. The car sped into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at more than 65 miles per hour. Henri Paul lost control. The Mercedes crashed into the 13th concrete pillar, spun, and hit the tunnel wall. Dodi and Henri Paul were killed instantly. Trevor Rees-Jones survived, though his face was severely injured. Diana was still alive, but barely. Dr. Frederic Maillier was driving through the tunnel when he saw the wreckage. He stopped to help. Diana was conscious, but struggling to breathe. Paparazzi swarmed around the wreck, taking photos as she lay injured in the back seat. Some even tried to get closer before police pushed them away. At 2 a.m., Diana was taken to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. She had suffered massive chest injuries, including a torn pulmonary vein near her heart. Doctors performed emergency surgery, trying to repair the damage. They massaged her heart for 2 hours. At 4 a.m., they declared her dead. News of the crash spread across the world. Millions mourned. Many blamed the paparazzi, whose relentless pursuit had forced the car to speed. Others questioned why French emergency teams treated her at the scene instead of rushing her straight to the hospital. Some believed she could have survived if things had been handled differently. Medical experts later concluded that her injuries were too severe. No emergency response could have saved her. At 6 a.m., anesthetist Bruno Rioux announced that doctors had done everything they could, but after 2 hours of surgery, she could not be saved. The crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel had caused catastrophic injuries. Her heart had been displaced to the right side of her chest, tearing the upper left pulmonary vein and pericardium. Surgeons performed internal cardiac massage and resuscitation, but nothing worked. At first, reports claimed the car had been going 190 kilometers per hour, 120 miles per hour, but later investigations showed it was between 95 and 110 kilometers per hour, 59 and 68 miles per hour. That was still twice the speed limit. The driver, Henri Paul, had a blood alcohol level nearly 4 times over France's legal limit. He had also taken prescription drugs. The crash was not just about speed or alcohol. Paparazzi had been chasing Diana's car moments before. Photographers swarmed the wreckage, snapping pictures instead of helping. At 4:30 a.m., Prince Charles was woken up with the news. He went pale and started shaking. They had been divorced for a year, but this was the mother of his sons. He knew he had to bring her home. That decision was not his alone to make. Queen Elizabeth II hesitated, concerned about royal protocol. Charles pushed forward anyway. He flew to Paris with Diana's sisters, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Lady Jane Fellows. When her coffin was placed onto the royal plane, He made sure it was draped with the royal standard. Back in Britain, grief spread like nothing the country had ever seen. Over 1 million bouquets covered the gates of Kensington Palace. People stood outside Buckingham Palace, some in silence, others crying. Across the world, the reaction was the same. Diana was gone, and no one knew how to process it. On September 6th, 1997, the world watched her funeral. Over 2.5 billion people tuned in, making it the largest televised event in history at that time. Hundreds of thousands lined the streets of London, waiting for her coffin to pass. The city fell silent as the carriage moved through, led by her 2 young sons, William and Harry. At Westminster Abbey, her brother Charles Spencer delivered a eulogy that stunned the royal family. He spoke about Diana's struggles, her rejection of royal traditions, and his promise to protect her boys from the same fate. The crowd erupted in applause, something unheard of at a royal funeral. Diana's death also changed how news was reported. For the first time, a major tragedy unfolded not just on television, but also online. BBC News and other outlets ran constant updates on their websites. Digital media was still new, but this moment proved its power. Even celebrities spoke out. George Clooney condemned the paparazzi, blaming their obsession for her death. Meanwhile, the royal family came under fire. Their response seemed cold, distant. Buckingham Palace did not lower its flag to half-mast. Official rules said only a reigning monarch received that honor, but the public saw it as a refusal to acknowledge the depth of their loss. The Queen stayed at Balmoral with William and Harry, trying to shield them from the media storm. But as days passed, people grew angrier. The silence from the monarchy felt like an insult. Under pressure, the Queen finally spoke. 5 days after Diana's death, she addressed the nation in a rare live broadcast. She expressed her grief not just as a queen, but as a grandmother. She called Diana exceptional and gifted, and acknowledged the pain people were feeling. It was a turning point. Diana's death was not just a tragedy. It was a moment that changed everything. The grief, the anger, the questions about the royal family, none of it faded quickly. In 2004, British authorities launched Operation Paget to investigate the conspiracy theories surrounding Princess Diana's death. The case had haunted the public since August 31st, 1997, when Diana and her companion Dodi Fayed died in a car crash in Paris. Mohammed Al Fayed, Dodi's father, believed the British royal family and MI6 had orchestrated the accident. He insisted it was a planned assassination, not a tragic mishap. The investigation took 3 years, cost over £12.5 million, and involved 14 senior officers. By the end, they had examined 104 claims and compiled an 832-page report. Many of the theories revolved around Diana's personal life. Some claimed she was pregnant with Dodi's child, and that the royal family wanted to silence her. Others believed she and Dodi were about to get engaged, which supposedly posed a threat to the monarchy. Operation Paget found no evidence to support these claims. Diana's close friends said she was not pregnant, and forensic tests confirmed it. The idea of an engagement was also dismissed. Diana and Dodi had only been together for a few months, and those closest to her said she was not planning to marry him. The investigation also analyzed the events of that night in detail. Toxicology reports showed that Henri Paul, the driver of the Mercedes, had a blood alcohol level 3 times France's legal limit. He also had traces of antidepressants and antipsychotics in his system, which could have impaired his driving. Witnesses at the Ritz Hotel had seen him drinking before taking the wheel. Despite his calm appearance on CCTV footage, forensic evidence confirmed he was intoxicated. The car was speeding when it entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. It was going over 118 kilometers per hour, 73 miles per hour, in a zone where the limit was just 50 kilometers per hour. The Mercedes crashed into a pillar, killing Henri Paul and Dodi instantly. Diana, who was still alive after the impact, suffered fatal internal injuries. None of the occupants had been wearing seat belts. This played a major role in the severity of their injuries. Experts later said Diana might have survived if she had been buckled in. After a long and costly investigation, Operation Paget concluded that there was no conspiracy. Diana's death was ruled a tragic accident. The British coroner's inquest in 2008 reached the same conclusion, blaming reckless driving and the pursuing paparazzi. But Mohammed Al-Fayed refused to accept the findings. He continued to insist that his son and Diana had been murdered in a plot involving MI6 and a senior royal. One of the most controversial aspects of the case was the role of the paparazzi. That night, Diana and Dodi had left the Ritz Hotel through a rear exit to avoid photographers, but the paparazzi still caught up with them. They followed the car through the streets of Paris and into the tunnel where the crash happened. Some witnesses said the photographers kept taking pictures even as Diana lay critically injured in the wreckage. The public was outraged. French authorities arrested 9 photographers and a press motorcyclist. They were accused of manslaughter and failing to help the victims, but the charges were later dropped. The court ruled that although their pursuit put pressure on Henri Paul to speed, they were not legally responsible for the crash. Investigators concluded that Paul's intoxication and reckless driving were the main causes. Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, publicly blamed the media for her death. He said tabloid editors who paid for intrusive photographs had blood on their hands. The criticism was not just aimed at the photographers who chased Diana that night. It was directed at an entire industry that thrived on exploiting celebrities. After Diana's death, many newspapers distanced themselves from paparazzi culture, but the damage had already been done. Henri Paul remained a key figure in the tragedy. He was the head of security at the Ritz and was responsible for driving Diana and Dodi that night. Toxicology reports confirmed he had been drinking heavily. Some experts estimated he may have consumed up to 8 glasses of Ricard, an anise-flavored liqueur, before taking the wheel. His blood also contained prescription drugs that could have affected his ability to drive. Conspiracy theories claimed his blood samples had been tampered with to make him look drunk, but DNA tests proved otherwise. The samples matched his parents' DNA, confirming their authenticity. Mohammed Al-Fayed argued that Paul had been working for MI6 or French intelligence, but no evidence supported this claim. Investigators found no sign of foul play. Paul's actions that night were reckless, but they were not part of a secret plot. When Princess Diana died in a car accident on August 31st, 1997, the world was in shock. At Balmoral Castle, Prince Charles received the news over the phone. The moment he heard it, he reportedly let out a howl of pain, a sound so raw that it stunned everyone around him. For a man known for his composure, this reaction was unexpected. Many believed that after their bitter divorce, Diana's death would not affect him deeply. But that night, it became clear. Her loss hit him harder than anyone had imagined. Their marriage had been troubled for years. The world had seen the affairs, the accusations, and the cold distance between them. Diana had spoken openly about Charles's love for Camilla Parker Bowles, telling the public that there were 3 of us in this marriage. By the time their divorce was finalized in 1996, their relationship seemed beyond repair. Yet when she died, something inside Charles broke. He was not just grieving the mother of his children. He was mourning a woman who had once been at the center of his life, a woman with whom he had shared love, conflict, and history. The circumstances of her death made it even harder to process. She was only 36 years old. She had been in Paris with Dodi Fayed, pursued by paparazzi, when their car crashed in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. She left behind 2 young sons, William and Harry, who now had to grow up without their mother. Charles knew he had to be the one to tell them. It was a moment he had never prepared for, and one that would stay with him forever. Despite the tension between them in life, Charles insisted on bringing Diana's body home himself. He told the Queen he wanted to fly to Paris on the royal plane, a decision that was met with hesitation, but he would not back down. According to Diana's friend, Richard Kay, Charles fought harder for her in death than he had during their marriage. He arrived in Paris with Diana's sisters, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Lady Jane Fellows. When he entered the hospital room where her body lay, those with him saw a change come over him. One eyewitness described how he almost collapsed as if struck by an unseen force. He stood there, staring at her, struggling to take it in. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and bowed his head. 16 hours after her death, Diana's coffin was placed on the royal plane and flown back to England. It arrived at RAF Northolt near London before being taken to St. James's Palace. The entire time, Charles remained composed, but those around him could see the grief weighing on him. He had spent years suppressing emotions, but now there was no way to hide it. 4 months later, in December 1997, Charles wrote a letter to his grieving friend Peter Houghton. It was 3 pages long, filled with words that revealed the depth of his sorrow. He wrote about an unbearable emptiness, describing how difficult it was to make sense of losing someone so young. Addressing Houghton's own loss of his wife, Charles tried to offer comfort, but in doing so, he also exposed his own pain. He included a passage from the Bible. Now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. It was his way of saying that, despite the pain, he believed in an afterlife where they would meet again. Years later, this letter was auctioned in Boston for over £1,500. It remains one of the few pieces of evidence showing Charles's private grief. Prince Charles has never been able to escape the regrets surrounding his marriage to Princess Diana. From the start, their relationship was troubled. The night before their wedding on July 29, 1981, Diana reportedly learned that Charles did not truly love her. She was heartbroken, but felt there was no way out. The entire world was watching, and backing out was not an option. Their marriage lasted 15 years, but it was filled with tension and heartbreak. Rumors of infidelity followed them for years. The biggest wound came from Charles's affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. When the truth became public, it caused a massive scandal. Diana was humiliated. She later said in an interview, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." Charles has admitted that he failed to support her during those painful years. He was caught between his duty to the monarchy and his feelings for Camilla. In the end, Diana was left to deal with the pain alone. One of Charles's deepest regrets is the belief that his actions contributed to Diana's tragic death. He has privately admitted that he feels he has blood on his hands. His affair had driven Diana into an unstable life. Under constant media pressure, the paparazzi followed her everywhere, turning her every move into a spectacle. On August 31, 1997, that relentless pursuit ended in disaster. As she tried to escape photographers in Paris, her car crashed, killing her and 2 others. The world was in shock. Charles was devastated. He had once loved her in his own way, but now she was gone. His regrets go beyond their marriage. He has often reflected on how the turmoil affected their sons, William and Harry. He struggled to balance his royal duties with being a father. After Diana's death, that struggle became even harder. His emotional distance during those years left a mark on their relationship, something he has tried to repair over time.